Miss Saigon is a musical by Claude-Michel Schönberg and Alain Boublil, with lyrics by Boublil and Richard Maltby, Jr. It is based on Giacomo Puccini's opera Madame Butterfly, and similarly tells the tragic tale of a doomed romance involving an Asian woman abandoned by her American lover. The setting of the plot is relocated to the 1970s Saigon during the Vietnam War, and Madame Butterfly's story of marriage between an American lieutenant and Japanese girl is replaced by a romance between an American GI and a Vietnamese bar girl. The musical was premièred at the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane, London, on September 20, 1989, closing after over 4,000 performances, on October 30, 1999. It opened on Broadway at the Broadway Theatre in 1991 and subsequently played in many other cities and embarked on tours. Prior to the opening of the 2014 London revival, it was claimed that Miss Saigon had set a new world record for opening day ticket sales, with sales in excess of £4 million reported. The musical represented Schönberg and Boublil's second major success, following Les Mis copyright renewals in 1985. As of September 2013, Miss Saigon remains Broadway's 12th longest-running show. Background: the musical's inspiration was reportedly a photograph, which Schönberg found inadvertently in a magazine. The photograph showed a Vietnamese mother leaving her child at a departure gate at Tan Son Nhut Air Base to board an airplane headed for the United States where her father, an ex-GI, would be in a position to provide a much better life for the child. Schönberg considered this mother's actions for her child to be the ultimate sacrifice, an idea central to the plot of Miss Saigon. Highlights of the show include the evacuation of the last Americans in Saigon from the embassy roof by helicopter while a crowd of abandoned Vietnamese screams in despair, the victory parade of the new communist Ra copyright Jim and the frenzied nightclub scene at the time of defeat. Production history: West End. Miss Saigon premiered in the West End at the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane on September 20, 1989 and closed after 4,264 performances on October 30, 1999. The director was Nicholas Hytner with musical staging by Bob Avian and scenic design by John Napier. In December 1994 the London production became the Theatre Royal's longest-running musical, eclipsing the record set by My Fair Lady. The original Kim was played by Lisa Longer, who became famous because of this role and won the Laurence Olivier Award and Tony Award. The original engineer was portrayed by Jonathan Pryce, who also won the Laurence Olivier Award and Tony Award for the role. Broadway. The musical Da copyright butted on Broadway at the Broadway Theatre on April 11, 1991 and closed on January 28, 2001 after 4,092 performances. Directed again by Nicholas Hytner with musical staging by Bob Avian, scenic design was by John Napier, costume design was by Andreen Neofito and Susie Benzinger and lighting design was by David Hersey. As of September 2013, Miss Saigon is still the 12th longest-running Broadway musical in musical theatre history. West End Revival. Preview performances for the anticipated West End revival in the show's 25th year began in early May 2014 at the Prince Edward Theatre. It is produced by Cameron Mackintosh and directed by Lawrence Connor. Auditions for the role of Kim were held from November 19, 2012 in Manila, Philippines. On November 21, 2013, it was announced 18-year-old Eva Noblezada was cast as Kim. Other cast members include Kwang Ho Hong as Thuy, John Bryans as the engineer, Alistair Brammer as Chris, Hugh Maynard as John, Tamsin Carroll as Ellen and Rachel Ann Go as Gigi. The official opening night was May 21. Other productions. Since its opening in London, Miss Saigon was produced in many cities around the world including Stuttgart from December 2, 1994 till December 19, 1999 and Toronto, where new theatres were designed specifically to house the show. In the small island community of Boublil, Norway with only around 11,000 inhabitants, the show was set up in the outdoor amphitheatre by the local musical fellowship and ran from August 5 to August 16, 2009. The local musical fellowship brought in a Bell helicopter for the show. According to the Miss Saigon official site, Miss Saigon has been performed by 27 companies in 25 countries and 246 cities, and it has been translated into 12 different languages. Tours. After the London production closed in 1999 and also following the closure of the Broadway production in 2001, the show in its original London staging embarked on a long tour of the 6 largest venues in Britain and Ireland, stopping off in each city for several months. The tour opened at the Palace Theatre, Manchester, and also played in the Birmingham Hippodrome, the Mayflower Theatre Southampton, the Edinburgh Playhouse, the Bristol Hippodrome and the Point Theatre in Dublin. This successful tour drew to a close in 2003 and a brand new production was developed by original producer Cameron McIntosh on a smaller scale so that the show could be accommodated in smaller theatres. This tour started in July 2004 and ended in June 2006. The first U.S. tour started in Chicago, Illinois in October 1992 and was then expected to travel to those cities that could accommodate the large production. The tour also played venues such as the Wang Center in Boston from July 14 to September 12, 1993, the Broward Center for the Performing Arts, Florida in the spring 1994, and the Kennedy Center, Washington, D.C. in June 1994. Cameron McIntosh said, "Corners haven't been cut. They've been added. There are only a dozen theaters in America where we can do this." A second national U.S. tour launched in Seattle in early 1995 and would close very successfully in August 2000 in Buffalo, NY after playing engagements in most major U.S. and Canadian markets, including Honolulu, Hawaii, San Francisco, Toronto, and return engagements in Boston, Chicago and West Palm Beach. The tour originally starred Dee Dee Magno as Kim, Dom Sesma as the engineer, and Matt Bogart as Chris. This production boasted all the original design and creative elements of Broadway, but on a scale that most major market roadhouses could accommodate. A non-equity North American tour began in summer 2002 to spring 2005, playing such venues as the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, Newark, New Jersey in November 2003, Raleigh, North Carolina in February 2005, and Gainesville, Florida in November 2003. Synopsis: Act 1, in April 1975 at Dreamland, a sleazy Vietnamese club, shortly before the fall of Saigon, it is Kim's first day as a bar girl. The 17-year-old orphan is greeted by the engineer, a French-Vietnamese man who owns the club. Backstage, the girls ready themselves for the night's show, jeering at Kim's Norvita copyright. The U.S. Marines, aware that they will be leaving Vietnam soon, party with the Vietnamese prostitutes at the club. Chris Scott, a sergeant disenchanted by the club scene, is encouraged by his friend John Thomas to go with the girl. The girls compete for the title of Miss Saigon, and the winner is raffled to a Marine. Kim's innocence strikes Chris. G. Van Tran wins the crown for the evening and begs the Marine who won the raffle to take her back to America, annoying him. The showgirls reflect on their dreams of a better life. John buys a room from the engineer for the virgin Kim and Chris. Kim is reluctant and shy, but dances with Chris. Chris tries to pay her to leave the nightclub. When the engineer interferes, thinking that Chris does not like him, Chris allows himself to be led to her room. Chris, watching Kim sleep, asks God why he met her just as he was about to leave Vietnam. When Kim wakes up, Chris tries to give her money, but she refuses, saying that it is her first time sleeping with a man. Touched to learn that Kim is an orphan, Chris tells her that she need not sell herself at the club, because he wants her to stay with him. The two pledge their love for each other. Chris tells John that he is taking leave to spend time with Kim. John warns him that the Viet Cong will soon take Saigon, but then reluctantly agrees to cover for Chris. Chris meets with the engineer to trade for Kim, but the engineer tries to include an America visa in the deal. Chris forces the engineer at gunpoint to honor the original arrangement for Kim. The bar girls hold a wedding ceremony for Chris and Kim, with G toasting Kim as the real Miss Saigon. Thuy, Kim's cousin, to whom she was betrothed at 13, arrives to take her home. He has become an officer in the North Vietnamese army and is angered to find her with Chris. The two men confront each other, drawing their guns. Kim tells Thuy that their arranged marriage is now nullified because her parents are dead, and she no longer harbors any feelings for him because of his betrayal. Thuy curses them all and storms out. Chris promises to take Kim with him when he leaves Vietnam. Chris and Kim dance to the same song as on their first night. 3 years later in 1978, a street parade is taking place in Saigon to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the reunification of Vietnam and the defeat of the Americans. Thuy, a commissar in the new communist government, has ordered his soldiers to find the still corrupt engineer. Thuy orders the engineer to find Kim and bring her to him. Kim is still in love with Chris and has been hiding in an impoverished area, all the while believing Chris will return to Vietnam and rescue her. Meanwhile, Chris is in bed with his new American wife, Ellen, when he wakes from a dream shouting Kim's name. Ellen and Kim both swear their devotion to Chris from opposite ends of the world. The engineer finds Kim and brings Thuy to her. Kim refuses Thuy's renewed offer of marriage and introduces him to Tam, her 3-year-old son with Chris. Thuy calls Kim a traitor and Tam an enemy, and tries to kill Tam with a knife, but Kim pulls out Chris's gun and kills Thuy. She flees with Tam and tells the engineer what she has done. The engineer refuses to help her until he learns that Tam's father is American, thinking the boy is his chance to emigrate to the United States. He tells Kim that now he is the boy's uncle, and he will lead them to Bangkok. The three set out on a ship with other refugees. Act 2, in Atlanta, Georgia, John now works for an aid organization whose mission is to connect Boublil Doi with their American fathers. John tells Chris that Kim is still alive, which Chris is relieved to hear after years of having nightmares of her dying. He also tells Chris about Tam and urges Chris to go to Bangkok with Ellen. Chris finally tells Ellen about Kim and Tam. In Bangkok, the engineer is hawking a sleazy club where Kim works as a dancer. Chris, Ellen, and John arrive in search of Kim. John finds Kim dancing at the club, and tells her that Chris is also in Bangkok. He then tries to tell her that Chris is remarried, but Kim interrupts. She is thrilled about the news and tells Tam that his father has arrived, believing that they are to go to America with Chris. Seeing Kim happy, John cannot bring himself to break the news to her, but promises to bring Chris to her. The engineer tells Kim to find Chris herself, because he doubts that Chris will come. Kim is haunted by the ghost of Thuy, who taunts Kim, claiming that Chris will betray her as he did the night Saigon fell. Kim suffers a horrible flashback to that night. In the nightmare flashback, Kim remembers the Viet Cong approaching Saigon. As the city becomes increasingly chaotic, Chris is called to the embassy and leaves his gun with Kim, telling her to pack. When Chris enters the embassy, the gates close, as orders arrive from Washington for an immediate evacuation of the remaining Americans. The ambassador orders that no more Vietnamese be allowed into the embassy. Kim reaches the gates of the embassy, one of a mob of terrified Vietnamese trying to enter. Chris calls to Kim and is about to go into the crowd to look for her, but John is eventually forced to punch Chris in the face to stop him from leaving. Chris is put into the last helicopter leaving Saigon as Kim watches from outside, still pledging her love to him. Back in 1978 Bangkok, Kim joyfully dresses in her wedding clothes and leaves the engineer to watch Tam while she is gone. She goes to Chris's hotel room, where she finds Ellen. Kim mistakenly thinks that Ellen is John's wife, but Ellen reveals that she is Chris's wife. Kim is heartbroken and refuses to believe Ellen. Ellen asks Kim if Chris is the father of Tam, and Kim says that he is. Kim says that she does not want her son to live on the streets as a rat, but Ellen tells Kim that they will do what they can to support him. Kim pleads to Ellen that they take Tam with them to America, but Ellen refuses, saying that Tam needs his real mother, and Ellen wants her own children with Chris. Kim angrily demands that Chris tell her these things in person, and runs out of the room. Ellen feels bad for Kim, but is determined to keep Chris. Chris and John return, having failed to find Kim. Ellen tells them both that Kim arrived and that she had to tell Kim everything. Chris and John blame themselves, realizing that they were gone too long. Ellen also tells them that Kim wants to see Chris at her place, and that she tried to give away her son to them. John realizes that Kim wants Tam to be an American boy. Ellen then issues an ultimatum to Chris, Kim or she. Chris reassures Ellen, and they pledge their love for each other. Chris will leave Tam and Kim in Bangkok but offer them monetary support from America. John warns that Kim will not find it acceptable to have Tam stay in Thailand. Back at the club, Kim lies to the engineer that they are still going to America. The engineer imagines the extravagant new life that he will lead in America. Chris, John, and Ellen find the engineer and he takes them to see Kim and Tam. In her room, Kim tells Tam that he should be happy because he now has a father. She tells him that she cannot go with him but will be watching over him. Chris, Ellen, John, and the engineer arrive just outside her room. The engineer comes in to take Tam outside to introduce Tam to his father. While this is happening, Kim steps behind a curtain and shoots herself. As she falls to the floor, everyone rushes into the room at the sound of the gunshot and find Kim mortally wounded. Chris holds Kim in his arms and asks what she has done and why she did this, as she explains that the gods have guided him to his son. Chris begs her not to die, as she asks him to hold her one last time. After sharing one final kiss, Kim says her final words to Chris, echoing what he said to her from the song Sun and Moon, and she dies in his arms. Film version: on October 21, 2009, a film version of the musical was reported to be in early stages of development. Producer Paula Wagner was reported to be teaming with the original musical producer Cameron Mackintosh to create a film version of the musical. Director Lee Daniels has mentioned directing the film version as a possible future project. Filming locations are said to be Cambodia and quite possibly Ho Chi Minh City. No casting has been mentioned, but speculation states that the producers will be seeking an unknown for the lead role of Kim. Cameron Mackintosh reported that the film version of Miss Saigon depends on whether the Les Mis copyright label's film is a success. Major characters: Kim, a 17-year-old girl, recently orphaned and forced to work at Dreamland. She corresponds to Butterfly in the original opera. Christopher Chris Scott, an American GI sergeant about to leave Saigon to return to America. He corresponds to Pinkerton. The engineer, a.k.a. Tran Van Den, the slightly sleazy but likable owner of Dreamland. He is half Vietnamese and half French. He corresponds to Goro. Ellen, Chris's American wife. She corresponds to Kate. John Thomas, Chris's friend, also a GI. He corresponds to Sharpless. Thuy, Kim's cousin and betrothed, to whom Kim's parents promised her when the two were 13. Has since become an officer in the Communist Vietnamese government. He is a composite character, corresponding in part to both the Bonds and Prince Hugh Madry. G. Van Tran, a hardened Saigon stripper. Initially voted as Miss Saigon. Tam, Kim and Chris's 3-year-old son. He corresponds to Dolor, or Sorrow. Musical numbers, casts, original international casts, revival casts, casting controversy. Miss Saigon has received criticism for what some have perceived as a racist or sexist overtone, including protests regarding its portrayal of Asians and women in general. Originally, Price and Burns, white actors playing Eurasian Asian characters, wore eye prostheses and bronzing cream to make themselves look more Asian, which outraged some who drew comparisons to a minstrel show. Hubert van Is, a Dutch photojournalist who recorded the most famous image of the fall of Saigon in 1975, considered legal action when his photograph was used in Miss Saigon. In the London production of Miss Saigon, Lee Salonga originally starred as Kim, with Jonathan Pryce as the engineer. When the production transferred from London to New York City, the Actors' Equity Association refused to allow Pryce, a white actor, to recreate the role of the Eurasian pimp in America. As Alain Eisenberg, executive secretary of Actors' Equity explained, the casting of a Caucasian actor made up to appear Asian is an affront to the Asian community. The casting choice is especially disturbing when the casting of an Asian actor, in the role, would be an important and significant opportunity to break the usual pattern of casting Asians in minor roles. This ruling led to criticism from many including British Equity. citing violations of the principles of artistic integrity and freedom. Producer Cameron Mackintosh threatened to cancel the show, despite massive advance ticket sales. Though there had been a large, well-publicized international search among Asian actresses to play Kim, there had been no equivalent search for Asian actors to play the major Asian male role as specifically, engineer and Tui. However, others pointed out that since the engineer's character was Eurasian, they argued that Price was being discriminated against on the basis that he was Caucasian. Also, Price was considered by many in Britain to have star status, a clause that allows a well-known foreign actor to recreate a role on Broadway without an American casting call. After pressure from Mackintosh, the general public, and many of its own members, Actors' Equity was forced to reverse its decision. Price starred alongside Salonga and Willie Falk when the show opened on Broadway. During the production transfer from West End to Broadway, a lesser controversy erupted over Lee Salonga's citizenship, as she was neither British nor American. Salonga is Filipino, and the AA wanted to give priority to its own members and so initially prevented her from reprising her role. However, Mackintosh was unable to find a satisfactory replacement for Salonga despite the extensive auditions that he conducted in several American and Canadian cities. An arbitrator reversed the AEA ruling a month later to allow Salonga to star. Recordings, response. Upon its Broadway opening in 1991, the musical was massively hyped as the best musical of the year, both critically and commercially. It broke several Broadway records, including a record advance ticket sales at $24 million, highest priced ticket at $100, and repaying investors in fewer than 39 weeks. Though the show has received awards and acclaim, it lost the Best Musical Award at the 1989/1990 Laurence Olivier Awards to return to the Forbidden Planet in London. Miss Saigon and the Will Rogers Follies led the 1991 Tony Award nominations with 11 nominations. According to the New York Times, Will Rogers and Miss Saigon had both earned 11 nominations and were considered the frontrunners for the Tony as Best Musical. But many theatre people predicted that Miss Saigon, an import from London, would be the victim of a backlash. There is lingering bitterness against both the huge amount of publicity Miss Saigon has received and the battle by its producer, Cameron Mackintosh, to permit its two foreign stars, Mr. Price and the Filipino actress Lee Salonga, to recreate on Broadway their #1 award-winning roles. The show lost to the Will Rogers Follies for nearly every major award, though Lee Salonga, Jonathan Pryce and Hinton Battle all won awards. Awards and nominations: Original London Production, Original Broadway Production, References. External links: Miss Saigon at the Internet Broadway Database, Official UK Website, Musical Cyberspace, Miss Saigon, On the Scene, Miss Saigon celebrates 4,000 performances, Time Review, noting changes from West End to Broadway, plot summary and character descriptions, Miss Saigon at the Music Theatre International website, Miss Saigon, School Edition at the Music Theatre International website, New Zealand premiere photos, New Zealand premiere cast, Miss Saigon, a U.S.A.